Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On the Trail in Search of Living Legends. We are in season 4. It's going to be episode 7. Really excited tonight. To start things off, I have my partner, Nick Valente, here with us as usual. Nick, how's it going, brother?
Oh, going great, Jeremiah. Great to be
Good to
back.
see you, as usual.
Oh, yeah.
And we are extremely lucky tonight. I think Nick and I can both agree on this one. This gentleman right here is probably one of the best guests we've ever had on. Very credible guy. One of the nicest men you'll ever meet in your life. Just a super guy, Mr. Darrel Denton, for part 2 of his story. Darrel, thank you for coming on.
I tell you what, with that type of introduction, I better be doing real well tonight, because
it's the truth, man. It's the truth.
I can't tell you how much I think of you guys, and that was very kind of you to say that, and
we appreciate that.
Certainly honored to be back on your show, and I appreciate
it. It's an honor to have you.
Let me tell everybody something here about, when Darrel tells you about his encounter, he gives you full description, full description on his encounter, and it's like you're there. That's how I felt last time when we had him on. It's just like you're there, and it's great to have you, though, Darrel.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate that, Nick.
Love having you on.
Very much. Means a lot. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll start off. My first encounter was in 1992, and I didn't go in the woods after that encounter at all. I was really too fearful to go in. Had a lot of nightmares for years and was really trying to recover from that. And my second encounter was purely accident. I wasn't in the woods hunting like I was on my first one. And there's a place that I've fished most all my life, and it's in Tennessee on the Cumberland River. And I've been fishing there since I was probably 10 or 11. Went there a lot after high school and fished after football practice or baseball practice with some of my friends. But this particular place there's an old water plant there, and it's kind of a private area. You can't get in there unless you really know somebody, but we happen to know the people at the plant, and they would let us park our vehicle down behind it, and you could go through a gate, and it went into the fairly deep woods that bordered the Cumberland River. This particular time, it was around 1998 or 99. It was about 7 years from my first encounter, and that was in 92. And like I said, I'd fished there many times. And it's a trail that goes through really thick growth, like ivy and brush, and then it gets into some hardwoods, and then you go through it again. Pretty good walk. It's probably a good 150, 200 yards from the actual road that I park at and go through this gate. And I carried my fishing equipment there, and I went down to fish this particular day. It was in the summertime, not summer, but probably April or May, spring, early summer. And I'd walk back there, and this particular time, the water was up real high. And there was a certain area I couldn't cross because the water was covering it. And I went around to walk down this trail that I'd always went down. And got on the trail and walked down and tried to get to the normal spot I fished at, but it was covered with water because it had rained a lot, and the banks and the creeks were up high, which covered up that spot. So I fished a little bit before I got to that spot, but it was still on the same trail. Now, this trail is more like a game trail than it is a regular trail where deer and whatever come up beside the river. And I had my fishing rods and my minnow bucket with minnows. I had one of those old styrofoam minnow buckets. And I'd walk down around and got to the spot where I was going to fish, and got set up with my chair and everything. And this kind of overlooks, it's kind of a high bank, maybe 10 foot from the water, and it kind of overlooks the river. And when the water's down, there's a sandbar that goes out there. And a little ways down where I'd fished too, it had the same type thing. It was a little cut there where the creek ran into the river. And I set up and I was fishing, and I'd caught a fish, and I'd walked down kind of close to the edge of the water because there's a lot of roots and trees that stick out of the bank. And if you don't walk down, you'll get your line hung up in it. It was probably 15, 20 foot from where my chair was, not very far. And came back up with my fish to put it on a stringer and put it in the water, and the fish in the water, and went to get a minnow, and my minnow bucket was gone. Looked around for it, couldn't find it, didn't know where it was at, couldn't figure out what had happened to it. Well, about this particular time, a storm was blowing in again, and it was real windy. Looked like it was going to rain or come a big storm. So, whoops, don't know what happened there. Am I still on?
Oh,
You're still on, buddy.
Okay. But anyway, I went, I don't know what I've hit here, but I hope I'm not. Anyway, I went back to look for my minnow bucket and couldn't find it. So I'm thinking the wind and the storm was blowing that, had probably blown my bucket in the river, but I never seen it. So I got all my equipment and went up and loaded all my stuff, went back to the car, didn't think a whole lot about it. Went back a couple of days later, and this happened to be a Sunday after I got back from church, and my dad was supposed to go with me, but he didn't go with me that day. He wasn't feeling good, so I went by myself. Got down, and the water had went down by then, and I got back to my normal spot, which was maybe 20 foot from this spot, not very far. The water receded enough where I could get there. And fishing again, pretty much similar like I had before, and caught a fish, and I went down the sandbar this time to get it, which was probably about 40 foot from where I was sitting, and came back, and my minnow bucket was gone again. Well, I was getting kind of weirded out at this time. I was thinking somebody was playing a joke on me, or somebody was there and they were taking my minnow bucket. I was thinking people, and looked around for it, couldn't find it. Didn't have any bait because my minnow bucket was gone. So I packed up and hit it back out again, the whole time wondering what was happening to these minnow buckets. So I went back probably about the next weekend. Can't remember exactly when it was, but it wasn't very far from there. Got another minnow bucket, and these old styrofoam buckets have kind of like a metal handle on them. And they have like a rope holding on the lid.
Yeah.
And this time I took a string with me that was probably 5 or 6 feet long, and I tied it around the metal part of the bucket, the handle, and tied it to a tree. And I set it next to the trail there and started fishing again. And I'd caught a couple fish and came back. My bucket was okay, no problem there. And I think it was about the 3rd or 4th fish I caught. I came back up from the sandbar, and my bucket was pulled. It was pulled over deeper in toward the wood part where the trail was. The cord was stretched, and I seen the bucket was there, and the lid was off. So then I started thinking, I don't know what's going on here, but somebody's trying to get my minnow bucket, and never had any clue that it was anything but a person or somebody down there. And so I walked over to the bucket and looked in the bucket, and there was one minnow left in my bucket. And there was probably 2 or 3 dozen in there that I'd bought. And there was only one minnow in there, one minnow in the bucket, and the lid was laying next to the bucket. And there was kind of like water had spilt out of it somehow on the trail. And this particular trail is kind of muddy anyway. You can see your shoe print or anything in it. And I looked around the bucket and couldn't figure out what had gotten my minnows. And I walked down that trail just a little ways, probably 40, 50 yards, maybe 60. It got so thick that you couldn't get through it. You had to bend down real low. I almost had to crawl through it. It was so thick. And When I got down almost to that area, I seen my old minnow bucket over on the left side. Well, I thought it was my old minnow bucket. It looked like it. It was laying in the grass there. And then over to the right was my other bucket that I'd lost either the first time or the second time. Both buckets were down there.
Wow.
So I started looking around and thinking, this don't seem to be right. And what would be doing this? And that's when I seen the track. There was a track that was fairly large. I didn't measure it, didn't have anything to measure it with me, but I'm guessing it was a 15 or 16-inch track, a big foot track. And then it went off in my head, you know, oh no, I haven't got around these creatures again. I didn't know they were down here, but I immediately knew that I thought there was a Bigfoot down there. So I got a little nervous, packed all my stuff up, and I went back to my car and was kind of weirded out because I really didn't want to be around them again. I still had a fear of them, but got back to my car and thought about it for a minute and went on home. It was about several days. I wanted to go back every day from that day, but I had things going on. I went back down there again, went back through the trail to the same spot. This time I brought my gun with me and still tied the bucket with a string on next to the tree. And I got down toward the bank, not to fish, but down toward the sandbar at the bottom of the bank, just kind of looking back to see if I could see what was getting my bucket. And I probably stayed down there a good hour or longer, and I started to give up. I started to come right back up and sat down in my chair, and I seen an arm stick out. Out of these bushes, I seen an arm stick out like a normal arm, but it was a hairy arm, and it was trying to grab my bucket. Well, I got pretty weirded out, and I jumped up and grabbed my gun and went up, and I could hear the creature running through the brush, but I couldn't see it. Wow. And by this time, I was trying to make my mind up where to run or stay, and I started looking down the trail as it went straight down. It got real thick and it kind of bent to the left. And I seen one of them. It was a small one. It was not a big one. I'd guess it maybe 5 foot tall, and it was down, crouched down, and it was behind a little tree and a bush, and it would sway its head from side to side looking at me. And I felt a little better knowing that it was a smaller one. And it didn't seem to want to harm me. It was looking at me. And I made a comment and I said, last time you left me one minnow, and this time you didn't get any of my minnows. And I could hear them in there moving around, and I didn't stay any longer. I left. So by this time I knew that what I had there was some more of these creatures. This one didn't look anything at all like the first one I'd seen. The first one I'd seen looked like what I call the wood booger. It's what I've seen pictures of. It's like a number 2. It's a really ugly looking type creature, kind of a human head face. This one looked more like the patty type. It was different. It didn't look anything like the first one. And I realized they were there, and I thought about it pretty serious for a couple of days before I went back. Well, I decided to start gifting them. It really took a lot of the fear out of me by seeing these, because I didn't feel as fearful toward these as I had the first one. It's probably what kept me from being so scared of them and starting to research them after this time. I started bringing apples and bananas and laying them on a stump and going back every couple of days, and they would be gone. But I didn't feel good about that, because I was thinking small creatures could get those too, like, possum or anything good. So I carried a small board with me, and I nailed it to the side of a tree up about 6 foot off the ground, and laid my apples and stuff on top of that. And they would come and get it, and I could see tracks everywhere on the ground. I did cast one of them. It didn't cast real good because the ground was so muddy. It actually broke when I got it out. But I started gifting these creatures, and I did it for probably almost 2 years.
Wow.
And I did see 3 of these creatures. None of them, I didn't see any real large ones. The biggest one I seen was probably maybe 6 foot, 7 foot tall, and the other ones were smaller ones like the first one I'd seen.
Right.
And I become pretty friendly with them. They would come out fairly close to me on that trail, and they never came out any further than probably 50 or 60 foot. They stayed back, but they were a lot different than the first one I'd seen. They didn't seem to mean any harm. They seemed to be more curious than anything. So one of the gifting trips I made down there, I bought a little bag of plastic whistles. It had little black strings on them, and you could hang them up on branches or whatever. They were for kids to hold on with a string if they used them. And I put these whistles and tree branches all around that area where it went into that trail, and left them some gifts, some food. They seemed to really like donuts, and they liked bread, and they liked apples, and about anything I left them, they would eat unless it was something that was processed. They didn't seem to like that type of stuff. And I kept an eye on them and became pretty good friends with them for a while. I guess it was about a week after I gave them the whistles, I went back and they were all gone. There wasn't any of them left. And when I walked in, this was probably the thing that really relieved more tension from me than anything. I felt like that I had learned a lot about them. I could hear these whistles all over the river. There was one to the left, one back in the brush real far, one across the river.
Darrel,
I mean, these whistles were blowing everywhere.
You realize what you did with those whistles? Now you gave them something to mess with humans even more with.
I did a good job with that. I really did.
Yeah.
You know what? And from here in the beginning of the story, they liked you from the beginning because you were catching fish for them.
Mhm.
Well, I think the time when they got all my minnows, but the one was the time that got me, because I made a comment to them back there. I said, "You left me one minnow. I mean, I can't catch anything with that." And they actually befriended me. I mean, I didn't have any problems with these creatures, and those whistles. Every time I'd go down there from that time, I would hear those whistles blowing. Even when I went at night, I would hear them blowing all over the woods.
They figured out how to use them, huh?
They figured out how to use them. Yeah, but I think it was maybe a little after a year they started leaving me things, and it was probably the strangest thing they ever left me. They left me a milk carton they had found somewhere around the river. It was just a regular half-gallon milk carton, and it had faded out. It was red, but it was more of an orange. And they had stuck sticks through one side to the other and one through the other side that formed kind of like a cross sticking out of the milk carton. And I matter of fact, I think I still have that thing. But
Interesting.
I realized that they were being friendly with me, and I was being friendly with them, and they left me a lot of stick things that stuck in the mud, little structures that they had made, and I become pretty good friends with those creatures. I even named a couple of them. I don't remember what I named them, but I would go in and they could hear my voice when I'd yell at them. And I could hear them moving around, and they'd come out on the trail and just look at me. Their heads side to side, and I kind of enjoyed being with them. And the thing that got me was the most was when I went in there. I guess it was nearly 2 years. I'd go down there because it wasn't very far from my house. I'd go down there and take them food every day or two. And I even told a friend, and he went down with me, and we gifted them for quite a while. And then I went down there one day to gift them, and where this water plant was, they had come in there with bulldozers and backhoes and leveled that whole area, just tore down all the trees, the brush, just completely cleaned it out. I don't know why they did it, but they just flattened it out back there and tore all the brush and trees down. And I went down there a couple times after that, and they had started building on to that sewer plant is what they had done it for. And I never seen them again, so I don't know if they found them or run them off or what happened to them. But that was my second occurrence that I had with my Bigfoot. That was definitely a good thing for me because it released. I can't tell you what it done to me mentally. I felt more comfortable around them, and I didn't have the fear that I'd had for so long.
Right. Let me ask you a quick question. That one, the juvenile you're talking about, the first one you saw at this spot, what do you think it weighed? That 5-footer.
I'm just guessing, maybe 200 pounds.
Okay, that's
it
interesting.
It wasn't a huge one.
It's probably a juvenile.
Yeah, but at 5 foot, 200 pounds is pretty put together.
Yeah,
that's pretty put together. Yeah, it had big legs. It had a big chest. It had more of a like I said, the patty type look face.
Okay.
It was, the head was completely different than the first one I'd seen, and the bigger one was probably between 6 or 7 foot, and there were more of them in there, but the only ones I ever seen were those 3. I could hear them in there, but I couldn't see them. But that was my second encounter, and it really did change my whole perspective of the fear I had, and I encountered a few other ones researching over the years after that, but I stopped researching in 2020 because of my third encounter. So that one got me back to where I was on my first one. So if you'd like me to tell that one, I'll be glad to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about that third encounter.
This one was in Cheatham County, Tennessee, which is about 30 miles from my farm. And we had a friend of mine we went to school with, and my research partner for a long time was Billy Howell, who's in my group. And he would go down there with me, and he called me up, and he said, David called, and he said he wants us to come down. He's got some kind of creatures at his house, and it scared his girlfriend to death. And I said, well, what kind of creatures? And he said, I don't really know a lot about it. He just wants us to come down there. So we went down and looked around, and we could tell for sure that it was a Bigfoot. These things were, this David happens to drive he's in the group also. He drives a diesel truck from Nashville to New York, and he's gone all week, makes a run there and a run back, and his girlfriend stays there by herself. And this is pretty remote area where this is at. It's over next to a big game reserve, and they've actually closed about, I can't remember if it's 300 or 3,000. It's a large number of the acreage in that area, and won't let people hunt in there anymore. And this borders his property. And we went down there and scouted that area out pretty good. It could tell what was going on and what he had there. But these things were coming in and stealing vegetables off the deck, their wood deck next to the house, scaring the dogs to death, looking through the windows at night at the girl and scaring her to death. And we were down there just about every weekend for well over a year, maybe closer to 2 years, probably a year and 7 or 8 months. And we would go down in the middle of the night and go down in the woods, and we'd split up and we'd try to see them. We had a FLIR with us, and we both had weapons, but hidden weapons, and we would split up and we would use a clicker to let us know where we were at. And we got down, the first time that we really got to see him was we were back in those woods probably about 300 yards behind his house. Goes way back in there toward the game reserve. And we were in there. I can't tell you what time it was, but we started hearing them moving around close to us, and we heard them several times that night. And we would hear one make a noise, like a grunting noise or something over to the right, and then we would hear a tree knock to the left. And this is real hilly territory. It's real steep back in there, and it would kind of bottoms out. And we had been going in there for probably about 3 weeks when we first seen the female, and she had a juvenile, and she would come out to the edge of where the brush and dropped off to this ravine and peek out at us, and we could see both of them. And we started gifting them, and those things were real. They were different. They looked more like the patty type, but they were a little bit more like a people look in the face. Kind of hard to explain. They had more of a human feature in the face. But we gifted those for quite a while, and they would leave us a bone when they wanted meat, and they would leave us a rock on the gifting spot when they wanted vegetables or fruits. And their favorite fruit was actually cantaloupe. They would eat it.
Oh,
And
cool.
they loved cantaloupes. Billy would go down there every couple of days, and then I would go down there.
Using you guys as a grub hub.
They did do that. We went through some groceries.
Wow.
But their favorite food, we found out, was cooked bacon.
Oh, who doesn't like bacon?
Yeah, who doesn't
Yeah.
like bacon? But they would eat that bacon up. As soon as we bring it in, we would hear them coming. They would come down and eat it. But
How did they like it? Crispy, well done, or?
you know, Nick, we cook it in a skillet. You know, it was. I guess they liked it however we cooked it. They liked the grease in it. They seemed like, but they didn't eat the bacon. But when they would get tired of something, they would bring us some type of symbol. It was usually a bone or a rock.
Yeah, they're trying to communicate with you there. That's some good info there, Darrell. Really.
It really is. Yeah.
We tried about every. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jeremiah.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask you at the cantaloupe, Darrell. When you gave him the cantaloupe, did you give it to him whole, or did you cut that up?
We gave it to him whole.
Okay.
And I've actually got pictures of these things. I wish I had them on here for you, but I do have pictures of the cantaloupe and the bone. And I still got the rock that they left me. It looks like a tool. It's kind of shaped weird, like a V. It's a rock they had shaped somehow. But and we actually kept quite a few of those things. I even kept some scat for a good while in a bag, but we couldn't find anybody that would tell us what it was. When we told these DNA companies we told them what we wanted to check, they didn't even want us to send it in.
Right.
So we called several of them, but anyway, this went on for quite a while. I never seen the big males. Billy seen them twice. He was down there more than I was. I went mainly on the weekends, and but one of those was around 12 foot tall, and where he come up with that figure, it was 10 foot from the ground to the top of the deck rail, and the head was about 2 foot above the deck rail.
It's a big boy.
That's a big boy, yeah.
That's big.
The other one wasn't quite as tall, but we did that for quite a while, and these were nowhere near as friendly as the second encounter I had, but they stayed back and they wouldn't come out much. But the female and the juveniles is what I seen, and but this went on for quite a while. Now then it started getting really strange, and I don't know why this happened, but it did. But we were down there one night, sometime around probably July of August of 2020. And Charlie Raymond, who's a friend of mine, who's over Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization, he came down and camped there with us for about 3 nights in the tent. And he had a lot of activity around his tent at night. And I think it was probably about a week after he left. We went in there one night to we would hide in the woods and watch them with a FLIR. They'd walk around and go between the brush, and we could see them by the heat, but we couldn't actually see the actual creatures. But we would watch them. And this particular night when we went in, I was sitting on a kind of a hill slope next to a big tree that had a fork in it. It wasn't a real tall tree, but I was hid behind it. And Billy my partner was to the left of me. And we'd been there quite a while and we hadn't heard anything this night, which was pretty unusual. And this was about probably 12 o'clock at night. And we heard these coyotes coming to the left, and it was a big pack of coyotes to the left of me. There's a big field to the left of Billy. And then the field runs into a swamp that runs under the road into a lake that runs to the Cumberland River. But we heard these coyotes coming, and they were getting closer and closer, and we could actually see the coyotes in the field with the FLIR. And then all of a sudden, they just completely stopped and quit barking, and we didn't hear anything. They just disappeared. We didn't see them walk off or anything. And then maybe 5 or 10 minutes after that, we heard a tree knock to the left of where the coyotes were. And then I heard one to my right on top of the hill. And then all of a sudden, it got quiet again. And this, like I've never seen anything like this, but it looked like a light bulb. It was completely white, glowing like a light bulb on the ground. It was coming straight ahead of us between Billy and myself over on top of ridge. It came down the ridge on the ground, walked all the way down on the ground, walked up the ravine, and was walking right toward me. And it was glowing so bright, it looked like a light bulb somebody was dragging across the ground.
Wow.
And it got so close to me that I actually pulled my gun. It was maybe 5 foot from me. And I didn't know what it was. And Billy, about that time, had a real bright flashlight. He hit it with a flashlight. And when he hit it with a flashlight, I know it sounds crazy, it turned into a possum.
Wow.
And it looked right at me and opened its mouth and made a hissing sound. And it turned into a natural form possum. And then it turned around and walked back to where it came from. I could see it. It was not a real dark night. I could see it going through the woods, the silhouette of it. And when it got to the top of that ridge where it came from, maybe about 5 or 10 minutes later, these huge orbs came down. And I've never seen anything like this. And I do have pictures of those also. I took about 50 shots from my cell phone. They looked smaller than they were on the cell phone because the distance I was from them. But these things were about the size of a beach ball. And there was 2 of them right next to each other. And they came down from the trees somewhere and hovered about maybe a foot off the ground. And I could see like light inside of them pulsating. They were pulsating red, orange, and pink. And this went on for maybe 20 minutes. We watched them. They were just sitting there above the ground. And maybe, I'm guessing, 70 yards from us. And we kept watching them. And by that time, Billy had moved up next to me. And he and I were talking. And, what are these things? I've never seen anything like this. And he's the same thing. He'd never seen anything like this either. But these things hovered above the ground, and you could see like lights moving. I can't explain it. It was like pulsating colors inside of them. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's the honest God truth. And then they went down the hill real slow, at a real slow pace, right toward the gifting spot. And we're hovering next to the gifting spot. And about that time, our trucks were back maybe 200, 300 yards behind us in the driveway of where we had parked. And the guy that lived there, David, had come home. His truck was parked behind mine. And this was a little after 1 in the morning. And then all 3 truck alarms went off at the same time. And it was really loud. And we didn't know what was going on. Then the lady there called from the house and said the creatures are here at the house. She called Billy's cell phone. He had in his pocket, so we ran back toward the house, and we got to the house and didn't see anything. But the truck alarms were going off, and they went off for a good 30 minutes, maybe longer. We got in the truck and tried to start it. It wouldn't quit. The alarm kept ringing. We couldn't cut them off. His truck alarm was going off too. And we couldn't figure out what had caused these truck alarms to go off. And they went off till they finally just quit. Well, when they quit, my cell phone was completely dead. Billy's cell phone was dead. Our flares were dead, and my watch had stopped at 1:43. And we were kind of weirded out, like, what has done this, because I've never experienced anything like that. And we even tried, all three of us, pretty good sized guys, and David is bigger than me. We pushed those trucks as hard as we could. We couldn't get the alarm to go off. But the next morning, on the back of David's truck, there was a handprint that was, I've got big hands, and it was twice the size of mine. It was on the tailgate where the dirt was on the truck. You could see the handprint. And all I could think of was those things had rocked the truck or something and caused all of them to go off. But that was a very strange night. I've never had anything like that to happen. And, we both were felt kind of weird about that. And we kind of didn't know what to do, where we should go back or what we should do. We decided to go back. The next weekend we went back. Went to the same area. This time it was sprinkling rain that night and a little bit windy. So we had a ground blind, like a plastic ground blind that Billy had hunted out of. And we both got in it. And we've been sitting there for quite a while that night. It was very unusual. It wasn't like it had been previous times. The week before was unusual, and this week was unusual. And we started seeing these white balls about the size of a softball. And there was about 5 or 6 of them, and they were little white round balls, and they were flying out of trees all around us, and they would go in between the trees and go back out and come back in again. Right. We didn't know what they were. We know they're orbs, but at that time we didn't know exactly what we were looking at. These things just kept coming, and we finally just had enough of that. Got a little weirded out. That was the first time that I got sick at my stomach like I did a week ago, and Billy did too. He had a headache, and he wasn't feeling good at all. As a matter of fact, he went back and laid down in his truck. And I went back and did the same thing. We decided to stay away from there a couple of weeks, and we didn't go down there. It's the first time we hadn't gifted. We didn't gift for about 2 weeks. First time we hadn't gifted the area. And I was at home at my farm, and I have a good sized house there. Actually a really big house, and I'm about 3,000 feet off the main highway back toward next to the woods, and I have horses back there. I have a stable on the right side and a barn on the left side, and they're both fenced and go way back in the field for my horses to run. I've got 2 in one corral and 2 in the barn side. And this was a Monday night, about 2 weeks after this happened with the orbs. My horses were going crazy. I mean, just like I've never heard them do. And I've got a floodlight at the end of the driveway, right in the edge of both of those fences, right next to the stable, up next to the drive, and have one on the opposite side of the driveway for the other fence. And it has a roll of hay next to it where the horses can feed at night. And these horses were all the way up next to the corner of that, looking toward the woods on both sides like they were just scared to death. And I walked around the barn, looked everywhere around the stable, didn't see anything at all, turned all the lights on, didn't see anything. The next night, about 3 a.m. in the morning, something started banging on the side of my house. And I'm talking about it was banging so hard that it knocked the picture off the wall. And then I went outside with a weapon, walked around the house, and looked. My dog was going crazy. I put him in the house, and he was just barking all night long. And we went around the house, both sides, didn't see anything at all. It was about 2 nights later, it started again. Something was banging on the right side of my house, and then it would go to the left side and bang. And we went around the house again, didn't see anything. Well, by this time, I was so weirded out that I didn't know, I couldn't sleep because I knew it was going to happen again. And I was there by myself because my kids were here. And good thing they were, they'd have been terrified. But that went on for about a week, banging on my house. And I couldn't figure out what it was because I couldn't see tracks because there's mostly grass around my house. Well, I got up one night. I knew they were going to come sometime between 2 and 4. Normally it was around 3. And I went out front to a building I had and kind of stayed next to it to see if I could see them coming in. And I did not see them coming in. So I went back in. I wasn't in but about 10 minutes and it started again. They were banging on the side of my house again, this time both sides at the same time. And I was pretty weirded out. I didn't know what was going on. And I couldn't see any people, and I couldn't see any people, so I didn't know for sure what it was. The next day, I had a couple friends come over, and including Billy. He came over, and we walked the property around there to see if we could find anything. And I had a big dirt mound over to the right of the backside of my garden that I had next to the woods, and it was just dirt that had been washed down by the rain, and it was pretty flat. And we were walking back to see if we could figure out what was causing this. And then I seen tracks, big tracks in that mud. And they were big tracks. I'm talking 16, 17-inch tracks. And there was only 2 tracks, one right foot 2 times, and then it went into the woods. And I couldn't see a left track. But then I knew that I had one there. And I'd never seen any of those creatures on my farm before. So this went on for probably 3 weeks. Well, I'd had enough of it. And I cut all my floodlights on around my house. And I had a pool behind my house. They had a pool house with a wrought iron fence from the pool house to my house. And I had a diving board on one end. And I heard something out in the pool house. And I could hear something banging on it. And I got up, and this was somewhere around 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. I was sitting in my den. I went out back to see what had done that. It had tore all the vinyl siding off the back of the pool house.
Wow.
And beat it up good. Just almost knocked a hole in the wall. And by this time, I was getting pretty scared. So I had my gun, my rifle, and my pistol when I went out to check the house at night. I was walking around the house on a pretty normal basis, trying to catch one of them. And as soon as I would go in, it would start. They'd start beating on the house again. So the next morning, I just stayed in the house that night. I didn't even go out and try to find them. And my horses were going crazy again in the corner. And I left the lights on down there, and they calmed down a little bit. Well, the next day I was feeding the horses, and two of my horses on the right side of my stable, the 2 that were in that field, something had braided the hair in their mane, and it was braided on both sides. And I called my dad. My dad and mom live about 500 yards from me. And I called them, and my dad came over, and he said, "I have no idea. I've never seen anything like that." And I'd asked my neighbor if she had seen anybody there, and she hadn't seen anybody. She lives probably about 600 yards to the left of me. And these are all farms where I live. We're not in a subdivision or anything. But I don't know what braided the horse's hair, but my kids didn't do it. They weren't there. But something braided it really good on both of them. And it was like tied in a knot almost. I couldn't even get it out. So
Yeah, I've had other witnesses tell me that before about the braiding.
Yeah, Darrel.
well,
Darrel, in my research, I've had a couple of dozen different times
Yeah.
that has happened on the people's property to their horses. So
Yeah.
it's not.
well, I checked into it after that, trying to figure out what had caused it, and I had a friend tell me that he called it a witch's braid. I think that's correct.
Yeah.
He said that he thought that these creatures had braided their hair, and I found that pretty startling because I can't see those horses standing there and letting them do it. But maybe they have some way to calm them down. I don't know. But anyway, couple nights later, it got kind of calm for a day or two, and I have 3 big sycamore trees in front of my house, and they go all the way almost to the stable, and it drops down a little ravine. And then I have a black 4-panel fence that's around my stable down there. And I was on the front porch that morning drinking some coffee, and I just happened to look up, and my sycamore, the one in the middle, and this is a big sycamore tree,
Right.
about 10 foot up, the middle one, something had broke a limb off about 10 foot up. And I'm talking about a good sized limb, anywhere from 3 to 4 inches. And it was just twisted and snapped. And it was 15, 20 foot long, and it was just hanging down. I thought that was kind of strange because we didn't have a storm or anything. And I walked down and looked at it, and there was all kinds of tracks around it. So they had been down. That's where they were watching me from when I came out. That's what I figured. So this kept going on. So by the time this was a good month in, I didn't really know what to do. I think it was maybe a day or two after they didn't bang on the wall. I came out on my front porch, and I had about probably 20 or 25 cats on my property, and most of the time they stayed in the barn. A lot of them stayed in the barn. They were just farm cats. The cat will have other kittens, and they just keep producing. But they weren't actually my cats. They were just cats that had moved in there. But I had 3 of them that were on the front porch. In the corner, I had a little cat house for this cat, and it just had kittens. When I walked out the door, the mother cat was ripped to pieces. I'm talking about just ripped to pieces. The little kittens were just ripped to pieces. They were all over the front porch. I was really, at this point, just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And that was probably the thing that got me to try to take some kind of action, because I didn't know how to stop these things. And I knew they were the Bigfoot, but I didn't understand why they were doing this to me. So after the cat issue that night, I had a couple buddies came over. They sat in the driveway, and I had one of the police officers that worked for me. I was the mayor at that time in that area, and they came over in the driveway. They were going to patrol it, come in and out several times that night, and see if they'd seen anything. And they didn't ever see anything. But that same night, about 1 o'clock in the morning, after my buddies had fell asleep out in the truck, I heard something bang on the back part of my house, and I got a screened-in porch on the back side. And I went to the screened-in porch, and I didn't see anything. So I decided to stay in the screened-in porch with my gun and just kind of hide down behind a freezer I had to see if I could catch something. And I probably sat there an hour or a little longer. And my friends, I heard them drive out of the driveway. They went on home. And it was probably about 3 in the morning. I heard something slam my front door. I mean, it sounded like something was breaking my front door down. It was loud. So I jumped up and went through the screened-in area there, through the house to the left, toward the front door. And I had my gun pointed to the door. because I thought something was trying to break in the door, and I have a round glass in the door. It's kind of a bevel type glass, but you can see something there, but you can't see what it is. I seen a shadow go by, and I knew it was on the front porch, so I tried to open the door, and I did open the door. When I did, I caught a glimpse of it. It was running to the right toward the woods, and it was a big one. I'm guessing it was a good 7-8 foot tall, and it never looked back. It ran as fast as it could to the wood line, and laying on my front porch, right in front of my door, was a dead goat. And I don't have goats. My neighbors don't have goats. I don't know where it came from, but it was laying on the front porch right next to the door. Well, by this time, I was pretty much, to be honest with you, scared to death. So
yeah,
I didn't know
understandably.
I didn't know if they were trying to kill me or why they were after me or anything else. So I called a buddy of mine that I used to be in a group with, and I helped him start. And that was Michael Patterson of Blue Ridge Sasquatch Crypto.
Yep.
Good friend.
I know Mike, good guy.
Mike's a real close friend of mine, and we did Blue Ridge, started it about 7 years ago, and before I started my own group. But I told him about it, and he says, well, man, let's call Scott Carpenter. So I tried to reach Scott Carpenter and find out, because I didn't know what to do at this point, because I didn't know how to stop them. And through him, through somebody else, I didn't actually talk to Scott, but I had got a message to rebuke him. Well, I didn't know what rebuke him meant, and really, and Scott, Michael Patterson and I talked about it, and he told me what you had to do, and so at this point, I was willing to try anything. So I went out to all 4 corners of my property, and I've got a big place. That particular area, I've got about where the house was at, there's about 33 acres. And then I have another tract or two to the right of it. And I rebuked all 4 corners of my property like they told me to. Please stop in the name of Jesus Christ. I ask you to leave my property and leave my home. That's what I said. And then I went inside the house and did the same thing. I actually did it twice. I did it another time outside, another time inside. And I was pretty frightened at this time. And I waited that particular night. I waited all night long, didn't hear anything. Week went by, never had any more trouble.
Wow.
They were gone.
Wow.
I don't know how that worked. I guess by the grace of Jesus Christ, I guess. But I've heard other people since then has tried that, and it didn't work, but it worked for me. Now, they were still in the woods behind my home, because my son and I were playing basketball, shooting basketball. He was practicing for his team. And I have a 25 by 25 foot court to the right of my house with a street light over it. And it was right before dark. We heard a huge tree crash in the woods. I mean, it was a big tree. And he looked at me, and I looked at him. He said, what was that? And I said, I didn't want to scare him. He was staying the weekend there. And I said, probably just an old tree falling. And 2 days later, we were doing the same thing, shooting some baskets, and I heard another tree crash, a big one. And my son looked at me and said, that's twice that's happened, Dad. What is that? And I said, I don't know what it is. So I kind of let that go. But I knew they were still in the woods, but they weren't around my house or my property or my barn.
Right.
So, I don't know why these creatures done that. I'm still weirded out by it. Can't figure out why they did this. I've thought about it many a time, because I never had any trouble with them. I don't know if it was the same ones that followed me home. I was told they did follow me home by certain people. I don't know why they did it, but only thing I can think of is maybe when we quit gifting them the 2 weeks, they got mad.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's the only thing I could come up with. But that's pretty much the story of my 3rd encounter.
Wow.
Yeah, they expect you to gift them every day.
Yeah.
No,
Well, we did, we did every day or two. Billy would go, then I would go, and they were happy with that. But that's the only thing I can think of, Nick, is that was the reason they done that.
Darrell, they
I think so.
probably left you that goat so you can clean it up and cook it for them and leave it out there.
I don't think I couldn't. I'll tell you what, Nick, at the condition I was in at this time, I couldn't eat anything. So it was a really strange, weird. I still think it's connected to the orbs somehow.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. Now, every time you saw the orbs, did you have electrical problems and did you get sick every time?
The first time we seen the two big red ones, the reddish pink, they were red with like, excuse me, they were red with kind of like orange in them with some pink. And no, we did not get sick that time we seen those two. The second time we seen the orbs, we did get sick and got a headache and lost all of our power. The first time we did not.
Wow.
It's wild. It's very it's interesting for sure.
I'll tell you, out of all the research I've done, and it's in this hundreds of people I've spoken to or communicated with, via email or text message, that saw and it had an encounter with a dogman or a Sasquatch, and at the same time they had seen orbs of light or some kind of UFO in the air. Out of all of those, I would say close to 50% of the time, they did have some sort of upset stomach or sickness type of feeling. And I believe like 10% of the time, somebody mentioned that their car wouldn't start. But after a while, trying it, after about a half hour, the car, kicked over then. So is that what you found with your vehicles? That after
our cars actually started fine because we started them. Well, our truck started up fine. We normally when you start the truck and the alarm's going off, the alarm will quit.
Right.
But they wouldn't quit. They just kept going. And they ran for whatever the duration that they're supposed to run. It might have been 30 minutes or 45. It was a long time that they kept running.
Yeah.
It was very. Yeah. I found it very strange that all this started happening after we seen the orbs, and I don't know what the orbs has to do with these things, I think all this stuff's connected in some way, but
absolutely.
I don't really know how, but
some sort of electromagnetic interference.
I've heard a lot of things about orbs from different people since then because I've been real curious to learn about them.
Right.
But when I know that the smaller orbs that we seen the second Saturday we were there were totally different. They were about the size of a softball, and they would move real fast and in between the trees, and then they would slow down and then speed up again. And we watched them, and they got really close to the actual blind we were sitting in, and we got pretty weirded out and left. But we did get sick that night. Now we did and got a headache too, but I don't know how it connects with why they were doing this to my house unless it was the gifting. But we just stopped going down there due to the fact of the orbs. So we felt like the Bigfoot left and something else moved in. So it may have been the Bigfoot. I don't know. The orb may be the Bigfoot.
At any time, Darrell, did you have any sort of mind speak happen to you?
No mind speak at all. None. No. Not at all. No smells, no noises. It was nothing. I've smelled Bigfoot many a time, and I've run into other Bigfoot over the years out researching. I'd see one walk by or see one way back in the woods, but never as far as encounters go, like the three I've had. I really don't know. I really don't know the answer to what happened, really. I'd like to know, but I've talked to a lot of people about it, but I've never had a really complete answer of why.
What would you say? What would you say in your Bigfoot encounters that they smelled like?
Well, the ones I smelt out in the woods when we were just researching in certain parts, the Shenandoah National Forest, excuse me, and then some other deep woods in Tennessee and Kentucky. Probably been in the woods, no telling how many times. Didn't have an encounter every time or see one, but you don't see them that often. I don't believe that you ever see them unless they want you to. I do believe that certain people, excuse me again, I do believe that certain people are, for some reason, able to see them more. Because I've got friends that's hunted for 30 or 40 years and they haven't ever seen anything. And I'll go in the woods for 2 or 3 times and I'll see one. I just seen one 2 weeks ago on the way back to Tennessee. I seen one cross the interstate.
Oh,
and
really?
I've never seen that before. It was right past the Kingsport, Tennessee exit. There was a diesel truck coming in the far left lane, and this was like 2 o'clock in the morning. Not a lot of traffic because it's 15 hours from me back, and I drove all night, and in the far left lane there was a diesel truck coming in the far left lane across the interstate. It was flat right here. You can see good. And I seen the headlights hit something walking across the road. And the closer it got, I could see the whole silhouette. I caught maybe 3 or 4 seconds of a Bigfoot going off the side of the road, going into the woods. So I can't tell you, but I have something about me that seems to draw them, and I don't know what it is, or seems to let me see them more. But I've had friends with me, and they'll see one, and they can't believe they've seen one. They've been researching for 10 years and never seen one. And it's really kind of, I don't really know what it is. I would like to know, but I don't think anybody knows. But it's some type of inner spirit or something we have. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But they seem to find me. And I just still this day would like to know what caused these things to get so angry to try to tear my house up and really terrorize my farm and my livestock. So very strange. I don't know if you've ever heard that type story or not. I haven't ever heard of any of them beating on people's houses. I'm sure they probably have.
Been through it.
Oh, you had it too?
I've had them bang the side of the house and stick to face. Oh yeah, I've been through it too. Nick can vouch for that one. It's a scary situation. You feel almost helpless.
Hey, Darrel, aside from the Dogman encounter you told us from last time, have you had any others?
I was at Martin Groves, and he's been a close friend for about 40 years, and a really good friend, actually. Martin and I have done a lot of things together. He and I went up to LBL early last Monday morning, and stayed the day and the night and part of the next day. And we went to a lot of areas up there that we had heard there had been recent encounters in, and several bays we went to, and some roads that go way back in there. You would have to know that area or you'd get lost back in there where we went. We went so far back in there. There was roads to the left, roads to the right, and these weren't paved roads. These were gravel or dirt roads. And we were up there, and had just got back in our truck. We'd been on the ground for a while, and this is probably 11 o'clock at night, maybe 10:30 or 11. And when you get to the LBL, it is so dark that you can't see your hand in front of you. It's dark out there, and we had gotten back in the truck to go to a different spot and to see if we could see anything. And we were well equipped. We had everything we would need to be able to see something. We had good lights and that type of thing. And we got back in the truck, and we had just turned off this one gravel road onto another gravel road. and turned to the right, and we were probably doing 1 or 2 miles an hour, just barely going. And I looked to the right, and the headlights you could see pretty well because it lit up that area pretty good. There was a lot of brush on the side of the road and a lot of tall weeds. And we seen this thing laying there in the weeds in the grass. It was laying flat on its stomach. Couldn't see the whole body, but I could see the head and part of a little bit of the body behind that. And it was kind of a gray silver looking thing. And it had eyes, seriously, it looked like a flashlight. They were just like penetrating small flashlights glowing. Like I've never seen eyes like that. And this thing just laid there looking up at us, looking up toward the truck at us. As soon as we went by it, Martin looked at me, and I looked at him and said, "Did you see that?" And he goes, "I did." And about that time, it crossed the road behind us. I did not see it cross the road. Martin did. He was looking in his mirror and seen it cross. He said it didn't run. It kind of like just barely just crossed it, almost like it was interdimensional. It wasn't running. It was just gliding across behind him, is what he said. But this thing was huge. The head was seriously about half the size of my window in my windshield of my truck. And immediately I got sick at my stomach like I have never got sick before. It wasn't like the Bigfoot sick where it's your whole stomach and chest. It was in my lower stomach. My legs were tingling. His was tingling. His chest and stomach he was upset at his stomach. So upset that we had to drive up and turn left. And I said, "You want to go back and look at it again?" He goes, "No, not right now. I don't feel good." And we got on the paved part and pulled over and actually had to get out of the truck because he was having a hard time breathing. He felt like his throat was swelling up and his tongue, he couldn't breathe good. Yeah. And I was pretty worried about him because we're back in there so far that a cell phone won't work. I couldn't get any ping or anything back there on a cell phone. And we sat there for a good 20 or 30 minutes, and he was actually feeling worse. I was feeling a little better, but still sick at my stomach. My legs felt okay. But we drove on down to a pretty good ways till we got to the parkway and got out in the light and just kind of stood there and walked around a little bit. But that's the only thing that I've ever seen that besides the first, and I do believe that was a dogman. Yeah. It was just, but I've never seen anything like this. This didn't look, I don't know how to say this, but it didn't look like it was even a normal type creature. It almost seemed like it was, I don't know how to explain it, kind of a, some type of interdimensional feeling I had for it. I don't know how to explain it. It was kind of like glowing, the hair, everything around it was. It was very strange. I've never seen anything like that. And he hadn't either. And I don't know that I'd ever want to see it very close again. Now, we were close to this thing. It was on my side. And, you know, I had the window down and on my side. And it was no further than 20 foot from my door when we passed it. And we were going really slow when we passed it. And as soon as I seen it, I turned to him to look, and he goes, "You seen it too?" And I said, "Yeah, what was that?" And then he said, "Did you see how big that head was?" And I did. And I said, "Yeah, did you see the eyes?" And he said, "Yes, I did." And then he was looking in his mirror, and he seen it glide across back behind the truck. It was really, never seen anything like that. Never, ever seen anything, not even close. Very strange. But now I've heard all kinds of stories about the LBL. Personally, I've never seen a dog man there until this time. Whatever that thing I seen did look like it was in the shape of a dog's head, but it was more round. It was more of a round head. And I don't know. That's always when we found a lot of tracks up there this time, big tracks, big canine tracks. And we did take pictures of those. I even posted them in my group. But that was the only thing that we seen. Now, we heard a lot of sounds. We heard whistles in the woods. We heard tree knocks. We walked a lot of territory that day up there. And even in the night, we were still out there walking before we got in the truck and we seen that. I'm glad we got in the truck because I would hate to walk by that thing.
Yeah. Never know what could have happened.
I couldn't really tell you what it was, but it was something like I've never seen.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was a complete dog form, but it looked like a dog in the head.
Yeah.
But very strange. I don't know what it was for sure. But I wish I had a camera. I would have took a picture.
Darrel, it was walking on two legs, correct?
I did not see it walking on two legs. No, it was laying down.
Oh.
We're on top of this little gravel road, and we're overlooking maybe a 3 or 4 foot drop to the right of the roadside, and there was a bunch of brush and grass right in there. It was laying down in a little cut spot in it, and you could see the grass laying around it and see its head. It was looking up right at us, and it was very strange. I did not see legs at all. It was laying down. Now, like I said, he said it looked like it glided back behind the truck. I don't know if it was running fast or if it was just moving slowly, but he said his words were it glided.
Yeah.
So I didn't see it myself behind the truck. He did, but I did see it laying there. I spotted it first, and then he looked at me real quick like that. And I looked at him. I said, "What was that?" And he said, "I know what it was." And then we started getting sick, and he was a lot worse than I was. And I guess that type of stuff affects other people differently, but it was I was very worried about him. And quite frankly, he's still sick today. He's been sick for 3 or 4 or 5 days now. So not the same sick, but still has those feelings that he had the other night. So I truly think that Martin and I both have some type of something in us that draws those creatures, because every time we get together, we run into something. We never run into anything like that, but we know when the Bigfoot's around, we can feel it.
Yeah.
And he'll tell me the same thing. Do you feel that? And I said, yeah. I said, it's probably a Bigfoot close. And we did that twice on that trip. We heard tree knocks right after we said that. So they were close by. But we actually went to the place where he had his encounter in '93 and walked back in there. We found all kinds of trails back in there, fresh trails, big tracks. And we couldn't get all the way back in there because it had grown up so much in the last 30 years. But we got pretty good. We got about halfway back in there. But don't think I want to go back there in the middle of the night.
Hey, I don't blame you.
Not walking anyway.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing stuff, Darrel. I mean, especially that last LBL that I'm still trying to process in my mind. Was it like kind of like in an army crawl when you guys drove by, in the position of an army crawl?
Have you ever well, I'm sure you have. Have you ever seen like a cat ready to pounce on something?
Yeah.
Like down real low.
Right.
And it's like ready to jump on something.
Yeah, it's on all 4 legs, but the elbow areas are bent. And
I couldn't see legs or elbows or anything, but I had that feeling like it was ready to jump out and like it was trying to ambush something.
Right.
That's the look it had in the face also with its eyes. And like it was, I mean, it may have been watching us when we were walking. We weren't too far from that area walking around in the dark.
Very well could have been. Yeah.
We had just got in the truck and we hadn't drove 10 foot when we seen it. And it was just a really strange looking, but I know the color was silver gray. It was kind of a silver gray color and kind of a bright silver gray. It looked like it had light penetrating off its fur. or whatever it was, but not have been fur, but it looked like it had light penetrating around its face also. But it was very strange.
You know, Darrell, it must have been stalking something to move like that. Definitely must have been stalking something.
I would say it was probably, there's so many deer up there, and there's no telling how many deer we've seen that night. And, you know, it could have very easily been stalking a deer, or, I mean, it could have been stalking us. I don't know. Because we weren't very far away from where we seen it. But whatever it was waiting on something to come by, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I wish Marty was here to tell you about it. He would, I'm sure he would tell me he would never forget it when I talked to him yesterday. So he's still a little shook up about it because he's had a pretty hard time going back there anyway.
I'd like to have Martin on. What do you think, Jay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Darrell, can you talk to Martin and see if he'd come on?
Yeah, somebody else had asked me if I could get him on their show the other day too, and Martin is he's a little leery now. He's trying to quieten down quite a bit. He don't really want to talk about anything about the government or cover-ups or any of that type of stuff because he's had quite a few things happen to him and I've had quite a few things happen to me, and I truly think it's only because Martin's my close friend, because he got hacked the week before I did, and he lost everything he had, and I got hacked a week later. And I'll tell you the strange thing about my hack. You've seen Martin's speech on several different groups, on Facebook of him speaking about the creature at the LBL. Well, I posted that thing in my group on a Sunday afternoon. Somebody had several people ask me, can you get Martin's speech where we can watch it? And I searched for it for quite a while and I found it. And I just posted it in my group. And it wasn't a minute that Facebook sent me a message and took it down and pretty much told me not to post it again. And I didn't. And I don't understand why it happened when other people had it, but they did do that, and it happened. And I have a witness that's seen that happen. And one of my admins immediately called me and said, "What is that all about?" I said, "I just posted Martin's speech, and they came on and told me if I did it again, they'd take my group away."
Wow.
So I don't know what's going on. I'm not accusing anybody of the government or anybody. I don't know that. And not necessarily they would do that anyway, but it's very strange how my phone got hacked and Martin's got hacked also.
Just very weird. Yeah.
Darrell, Martin knows me, and just tell him I'd really take it as a personal favor if he can come on like next Sunday, for instance.
Yeah, I'm friends with him too.
He knows I don't put up with any BS stuff, and I wouldn't ask him any crazy questions. If he wants, maybe the two of you can come on at the same time. Feel better that way. But I really would love to get him on there for that.
Yeah.
I seriously, Nick and Jeremiah both. I think a lot of both y'all. I'll ask him for you. Like I said, I had somebody else contact me twice, and
well, you like us better, so. We got first.
Well, I'm just telling you ahead of time because I've already mentioned, that, and he said he would think about it. Right now, he's been a little weirded out because all this stuff going on. He's just trying to kind of lay low, and to be very truthful, he's pretty sick right now. So, but I will talk to him, guys. I think a lot of you, and I certainly appreciate and honored that y'all had me on again. I hope tonight's story was as good as the last one for you.
Oh,
phenomenal, Darrell.
Very much appreciate it.
Actually, you added a few things to our knowledge bank here.
Absolutely.
That was great. Just tell Martin, I'm asking for him to come on, and we'll do good by him. We're not gonna, press him for anything crazy.
Well, you got to know Martin now. He's kind of old school like I am, and all he has is a flip phone. So, he would have to, I don't know, we'd have to work something out with that too. But
yeah, we can, people can call. There's a way to call in on Zoom. So we'll figure it out. We can
all
get
right.
him on. But yeah,
I'll see
Darrel,
what he says. I'll be glad to see what he says. And I've just really enjoyed being on your show again. I appreciate the opportunity you guys asking me.
yeah, we'll have you back on at some point, man. Like I said, I think I can speak for Nick on this. You're one of our best guests we've had. Great guy. Yeah, everything you tell, like Nick said earlier, is in great detail. You're very credible. Just a great guy, man. We really think a lot of you.
I feel the same. I feel the same with you too, Jeremiah. I'm gonna get up to the how do you say it? The Adirondack. I can't say
Adirondack.
it. I'm gonna get up that way sometime and go do a little searching with you. But
sounds good. Hopefully Nick will join us.
Maybe Nick could go with us.
You let me know. I'll come up.
Absolutely.
That sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it again.
Absolutely, guys. Stick around for a few minutes after I cut the recording out, if you don't mind, guys. Well, everybody, this has been Darrel. He's second time in the show, and Darrel, like I said, is a phenomenal guy, very credible. You can take everything he said to the bank. I can get that much. Darrel, thanks once again. Nick, thank you. My partner, Nick, thank you very much. And we will be back. If anyone wants to come on the show, report an encounter, you can get a hold of Nick and I on Facebook Messenger, and I would be more than happy to help out. Darrel, you want to give a shout out to anyone before we go?
I appreciate everybody joining our group, Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, and Blinds and Booze also. Krista is my admin, and Jeremiah and Nick are both members of my group, and I appreciate both of them very much. And like I said, again, honored to be on. Thank you very much.
Not a problem. All our pleasure. All right, gentlemen. Well, have a good evening, and talk to you in a few.
All right.